two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Today's show is very much mine. Most of the questions are mine, as well as the answers. It's a topic I've been involved with for about a decade. But to preserve our interview format, Taylor Moon, the new chair of the Ithaca DSA Housing Policy Committee, is here with me to ask the questions, some of which may be his own. We will be talking about the Tompkins County IDA. Go ahead, Taylor Moon.
Hi, Teresa. Yeah, I guess just diving right in to the questions. There's been some controversy in the press lately about the government outfit called the IDA. So what exactly does that stand for?
IDA stands for Industrial Development Agency. And you already referred to it as a government agency, and indeed, it is a government agency. It is formed under New York State legislation, but uh, the members are appointed by the county legislature. So it is also a creation of Tompkins County government.
So what exactly does this agency do?
It is supposed to be a job creation agency, and it has the ability to issue all sorts of tax benefits for basically for new buildings. And the original idea was that these buildings were supposed to be manufacturing, industrial, as the name
Mhm.
says. Um, and once in a while, that is what they do, but it is, at least in Tompkins County, becoming quite rare. Uh, they can they can exempt the developers of a new building from paying sales taxes when they buy parts of the building.
Mhm.
You know, the the bricks or the mortar or the lumber or whatever they're using. They can exempt them from what's called a mortgage recording tax. But the big controversy swirls around their ability as to do what is called abatements of property taxes. Now, that means that indeed the property tax is still paid, but or there is still a property tax, but while construction goes on and in the early years of operation, it is much, much reduced, even though the assessment has already gone way up. And this is what causes a lot of despair, you might say,
Mhm.
among the various governments that depend heavily on property taxes, including the county, the city, and maybe most of all, the school districts.
So you would say that the property tax abatements in particular are the source of a lot of the controversy.
Yes, um, absolutely. Now, when people object to the tax abatements, then the IDA members and staff fight back and say, yeah, but if we didn't do this, nothing would be built, and you would just have a very low tax on a vacant lot. I think there are a lot of arguments, and we'll get back to that later, that
Hmm.
this isn't really true, but or it's partly true, but not entirely true.
Yeah. So I guess the next question that I have written down is what can it grant tax abatements for? But I think kind of something I would like to add on there is I know that there's a focus of what it has been granting a lot of these abatements for in terms of particular types of apartments. So I'd like to hear about that.
Yes, well, that is what's going to come up. What the state law tells it can do is most first and foremost, I think I've said before already, job creation. Secondly, public benefits. And that's where things get really fuzzy. Public benefits can certainly include, for instance, solar, solar panel farms. They do, and they have granted advantages to a number of those around the county, and I think it's quite well liked. Also, low income housing is considered a very proper use. That is not market rate housing, not luxury housing, but housing for people who really have very little money. Again, that's not really, that's perfectly acceptable under the law. I think there are provisions also for helping out where a project is going in where there has been what's called a brownfield. That is where earlier industry has seriously polluted a site. And we have two examples of this right in Ithaca. One being the former site of Ithaca Gun, and the other being the former site of Borg Warner on South Hill, which has become the huge, it's now called Southworks project. And that's massive because that was a very large industrial area and spilled all sorts of stuff that caused all sorts of problems for years and years. Now, there has been one other, what it can grant abatements for, and that is when the city passed legislation, that is, the city of Ithaca passed legislation, um, community investment incentive tax abatement program, usually known as CTAP, which said essentially build anything big in central downtown and you deserve a tax abatement.
Hmm.
And that is where much of the controversy is.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the main things that I've heard about as being kind of controversial. Um, would you say that there are other projects that have been controversial, or could you just expand on some of that controversy?
Well, I mean, a different one that was controversial for totally different reasons was when they granted some advantages to the Cargill salt mine,
Mhm.
and people were objecting that it was endangering the lake. And that is in and of itself, controversial, quite outside of the benefits that have probably by now ended, for all I know. Of course, there are also non-controversial projects. As I say, businesses, jobs. There have been a few of those. A small brewery in Lansing, a project that makes, I think it's beds in Dryden, and has created quite a few jobs.
Mhm.
Those solar projects that I talked about, there was a little controversy initially that they were competing with agriculture, but what's been found is that agriculture and solar panels are very compatible. You just need to know to plant that grows nicely in the shade, that
Hmm.
prefers to grow in the shade. So it's not just that you bring in sheep to graze under them.
Hmm.
That's been done for a long time, but lots of other things can grow there too. And there is research going on right now about what,
Yeah.
does well.
But yeah, I think I would like to hear a little bit more about CTAP in particular. I know that part of it is creating, a certain portion of it as below market rate housing, but maybe that mechanism is imperfect.
No, it's not. I don't think that the below market rate part has much to do with CTAP.
Okay.
CTAP was just saying we need density in first it was the central downtown area. Now they've expanded it to the waterfront, which brings in new problems.
Yeah. So was I incorrect in understanding that part of what the IDA would grant abatements for was complexes that had some portion of below market rate housing?
Well, it's something that they do, and
Yeah.
that usually is not particularly controversial. Though there may be some, you might say, NIMBY
Yeah.
attacks from potential neighbors, but that's a different thing, and that doesn't really.
Okay. So how did the press get interested in the IDA?
The Cornell Brooks School of Public Policy had a little project in which they put some undergraduates to researching IDAs statewide, and they came up with a paper entitled Policy Crossroads: Reconsidering IDA Housing Tax Breaks in New York. So, as I say, that was statewide. And they actually called a press conference in downtown Ithaca, to which, in which, to present their paper, they invited Ron Deutsch of an outfit now called Reinvent Albany, though I remember him earlier from his role in the Fiscal Policy Institute and state taxes. And they brought also the Reverend Peter Cook of the New York State Council of Churches, who also, I think, has been here before on state tax matters. And they included a case study of Library Place,
Hmm.
a very controversial building.
Yeah, so why don't you tell me more about Library Place?
The earliest controversies had nothing to do with the IDA, but simply had to do with competing developers who wanted to develop the site that was the site of the former county library building, which was a complete disaster in many ways. And so the first controversy was within the legislature over whether it was the best project of several that were proposed. Developer Frost Travis claimed that his project would bring affordable apartments for senior citizens and would have a deal with neighboring Lifelong, which is essentially our senior citizen center. And I think it was that deal with Lifelong that actually won them
Hmm.
the project from the county legislature. But then new problems arose. There were delays in dealing with the asbestos in the building, and that caused yet another controversy. There were construction delays that caused construction prices to go way up. And so the final tax abated project came out with very high rents.
Hmm.
And Frost Travis was not able to get many renters. It was largely vacant. And he came back to the IDA and asked that the limitations that it be only for senior citizens be removed.
Hmm.
And apparently he got, I think at one point I heard that he got an undergraduate living there, renting there. Some kid who must have had a load of money. At first, the IDA resisted, but eventually they gave way and let him rent it to all ages. But nevertheless, he still couldn't make a go of it. And finally, he sold it
Hmm.
to Park Grove, the company that's building down on Route 13, a bunch of apartment buildings, Route 13 north of the center of the city, near the Cayuga Medical Building.
Yeah. So was there anything that the IDA could have done to avoid all of those problems?
Uh, I think there were a few things. Let me first explain that the IDA does not exactly hire its own staff, but it is staffed by IAED, the Ithaca Area Economic Development,
Hmm.
an outfit that is devoted not just to staffing the IDA, but to other economic development projects. And I think if they had done due diligence and looked into Frost Travis's records, they might have noticed that already before they had a deal with him, he had bought some years earlier the Ithaca gun site and not managed to do anything with it. Finally, he sold it to Todd Fox of Vism,
Hmm.
and there is now, it is now renting apartments.
Yeah.
Todd Fox, I think, also got an abatement, but is clearly doing successful work. And as I say, that was a what's called a brownfield site.
Yeah.
So special problems and expenses in
Yeah.
getting it redeveloped. Another thing that I think the IDA could do is look more critically at the finances of the applications. In other words, as far as I can see, there are these applications that have, this company has so and so much money, and we estimate that this will cost this and that will cost that, and so these will be our expenses. And as far as I can see, the IAED staff has simply been taking this as truth.
Hmm.
And I have seen an Ithaca citizen who is not paid to do this at all, but who has very serious qualifications for looking into financial matters. In fact, a Cornell PhD. And on different projects, he has found in some cases, nah, that this developer doesn't have the money he claims to have. It's almost always he. And in other cases, oh boy, this company has so much money, they don't need the tax abatement.
Yeah.
And we've had both those kinds of examples.
Hmm.
And obviously, Frost Travis is an example of does not have the money he needs.
Yeah. So I guess you may have already answered some of this, but more broadly, what do you see as the problems with Tompkins County IDA?
Well, I think it's what I sometimes call market worship, belief that markets resolve everything, that and you can build the most expensive housing and the benefits will just trickle down to the poorest people. It's been shown that for any process like that, it takes something like 30 years and it just doesn't work,
Mhm.
basically. Ineffective.
Yeah.
Also, they claim if we didn't give these abatements, nothing would be built on this site. I think I mentioned that before. Well, I think I can remember only one situation where nothing was built because they didn't grant an abatement. And that was when Jason Fain wanted to build on the steep slope of the south side of 6 Mile Creek.
Hmm.
They refused it, and he just sort of walked away from it. He's still stuck on, as far as I know, owning the property, but he's not. And nobody felt that that was an appropriate place for any development.
Yeah.
So that was hardly a problem. And I think I mentioned the other examples: failure to do due diligence about developers, failure to question the financials one way or another. Oh, okay. One third problem that I see with them is there is a requirement, and I think CTAP was the beginning of this, that 1/5 of the housing of a market rate project should be rented at lower rent, at affordable rents, or there is an alternative, which is what's called feeing out, pay a fee to in this case, to the Community Housing Development Fund.
Hmm.
And they brag about the fees that they pay to the Community Housing Development Fund, but they are totally inadequate. I mean, you couldn't build anything
Hmm.
on the basis of that. The housing fund gives small grants to show that there is local support for a project, and then it goes and gets tax credits under a completely different program, which is not terribly good.
Yeah. So I think we have time for just one more question.
Yeah.
So is the IDA the only way for a project to get tax abatement?
Actually, it isn't. And I was quite surprised to learn this.
Oh.
But for a project to build, guess what? Low income senior housing by INHS on West State Street, where family medicine used to, well, I think the building is of family medicine still stands there, but it's going to be torn down or has been torn down. And INHS plans to put in a modest sized senior housing with childcare on the ground floor, which is also badly needed. And the IURA, Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency staffer, Nels Bone, who's pretty sophisticated, came to the city and said the city could give him a tax abatement. And the city kind of was surprised. Then why not the IDA? And he said, because if we go to the IDA, we have to pay a big fee to them, and you can just give it to us. And the city did. So it's not the only way.
Mhm.
But obviously, the city is, much more limited in what it can give abatements for. But guess what? Low income senior housing is something it can do.
Mhm. Well, yeah, this has been very informative. I think that's all that we have time for.
Yes. Uh, so thank you, Taylor Moon, for helping me with this. We've talked about the IDA, the Industrial Development Agency, most of all of Tompkins County, but also somewhat of the state. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.